Hello and welcome to our short guides to using routine outcome measures for anyone and everyone who works with children and young people in the Avon Wiltshire CAMS in Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. This guide is a collaboration between the Avon Wiltshire Partnership and the Child Outcomes Research Consortium, a project of the Anna Freud Centre. The aim of this guide or training module is to equip staff with a foundation level of knowledge, competence and confidence to embed the routine use of outcome and feedback measures in all support work for children and young people. Additionally, we aim to provide awareness of where all staff can access all of the guidance and support to build upon this foundation level of knowledge. The learning objectives for this module are stated here. Learners will understand what outcome and feedback measures are and why they're beneficial to them, to children and young people, and to the service. Learners will understand the key principles about using outcome and feedback measures, and learners will understand the AWP approach to routine outcome monitoring and be able to meet the trust expectations in their practice. Finally, learners will know how to access further guidance and support for using measures routinely. So, the four key areas that we will cover in this module are: what exactly are outcome and feedback measures? Why should we use them? Or why and how are they helpful? The AWP CAMS approach to routine outcome measuring, which is often abbreviated to ROM, which includes the expectations and responsibilities of. Okay, so let's start with a good understanding of what exactly are outcome and feedback measures. Perhaps they can be more simply described as mental health questionnaires. They are questionnaires designed to measure aspects of a person's mental health and well-being. There are a wide variety and range of measures available, each of them designed to measure a particular aspect, and we'll cover more on this in a moment. It is important to note here that measures that are used for children, young people and families in mental health services should be those that have been robustly designed and tested. The measures that we use in the Avon Wiltshire Partnership have been validated and standardised. This means that they are valid, they measure the intended construct and avoid bias as much as possible, and they are standardised and reliable, which means they get the same results each time if characteristics stay the same and they avoid inconsistency. Measures or mental health questionnaires come in different forms. Those are completed by children and young people themselves, which are arguably the most important type to consider. Those measures completed by mental health professionals themselves, based upon their perspective of a child or young person. Those completed by the parents or carers of children and young people who are receiving support or treatment. And also there are measures designed to be completed by other persons most knowledgeable about a child or young person, such as teachers, support workers and the like. As you can probably imagine, to build the most informed view of what's going on for a child or young person, we would capture information from each of these types. Whilst this is not always possible or feasible, the priority is to ensure that we capture the child or young person's own view of what's going on for them. Additional perspectives should be captured and considered as is feasible to do so. There are two broad categories or types of measures that we should be aware of. There are outcome measures, which are tools that relate to and measure changes in the state of an individual's mental health or well-being, and experience or feedback measures, which are tools that collect information from those receiving help about how they are finding it or have found it. Outcome measures can be considered in three different types. Those that measure and monitor symptoms of mental ill health or well-being difficulties. Those that measure well-being or functioning of a child or young person, and functioning questionnaires measure how much a young person's mental health affects their day-to-day life, designed to help mental health providers understand how well the person can do everyday activities. And there are goal-based outcome measures, which of course are a way to monitor progress towards a goal in support with children and young people and their families and carers. Experience measures can be considered in three different categories. Session feedback measures, which capture the experience of a child or young person during their treatment or support. Relationship measures, which are designed to capture a child or young person's view on how well they can relate to the mental health professional supporting them. And then there are general experience measures, which capture the whole experience of a child or young person of their support, usually collected at the end of treatment. So then, why and how are measures helpful? Broadly speaking, there are three main areas of benefit. Firstly, and most importantly, measures benefit the children and young people that we see in services. They enable better care and support for them, and we'll look at this in more detail in a moment. Secondly, the effective use of measures has the potential to improve the quality and effectiveness of services or interventions. Thirdly, the data from measures support services to demonstrate effectiveness and impact, providing evidence-based outcomes and accountability. For the purpose of this training, we're going to focus on the first and most important area of where measures have the most potential to benefit, experiences and outcomes for children and young people themselves. So where better to start than the views of young people themselves? The Child Outcomes Research Consortium, Cork, worked with some young service users to explore their views and experience of using measures in their support. This is what they told us.
Practitioners in mental health often use questionnaires to understand more about different aspects of your mental health, to measure problems or strengths, or to track how they change over time. The staff at Cork are often part of discussions about what the experience is like for children and young people who are coming for support. How do young people relate to filling in outcome questionnaires? In this video project, some of the mental health practitioners from Cork Member Services and young champions from the Anna Freud National Centre have shared their views. First, let's hear about why mental health practitioners can find outcome measures useful.
I would explain this is really useful to help me to understand what might be going on for you. You know, lots of people, we make our assessments from professional training, but also we all have our own frame of reference from our experience, and I think this helps us to be more objective as well. I think what I would do is I would explain it as that this is not a negative thing about you, this is not about a judging thing, this is about helping me to understand you better.
Instead of making assumptions, if they're applied properly, the measures will ensure that we're capturing the symptoms or the actual issues, problem, use the measures effectively. We find that we don't miss problems that maybe we would if we wasn't using the measures. Because sometimes, just in basic clinical interview, things can get sort of looked over, and until we actually see it, a lot of young people won't actually have an understanding of different types of the problem until you see it and go, oh yeah, do you know what, when you see the question, you might say, I didn't even think about talking about how bad my sleep was, for example. And that's being prompted often by looking at the form. So the forms are really essential in letting us understand the young person better.
Okay, that's great, but is this about the practitioner or about me, the service user? How am I involved, and how does this become helpful to me and a meaningful part of my support?
I do think that these outcome measures are good, but only when the clinician does go through the results with the young person, because I've had experiences both where the clinician was really good and went through it with me and showed me the tables and the charts, and I felt like I really understood why we were doing that outcome measure and what was coming from it, whereas I've had experiences doing exactly the same questionnaire where they've got me to do it in the waiting room before my appointment, taken it, and I've never seen it again nor heard about the results. So I think it is really important that if they are going to do these questionnaires, that they do feed back to the young person.
I think the outcome measures should be so mutually beneficial to both therapist and client. And I've found so often in like past therapies and things that they're just not. They're used for the therapist or the whoever. They're kept for them, they're kept for their resources, they're kept for their research or whatever they're doing with them. And you never see or hear of them again, and you don't know what they're thinking about what you've said. It makes you really paranoid and all things like that.
I've completed outcome measures, but then it's sort of like, that's it. I've never heard anything about it ever again. And I've sort of been left wondering, okay, this time's been taken within my session to go through all of these outcome measures, but then what next?
I didn't really know why I was doing it. They said, oh, this is just to help me, but I think they needed to explain a bit more why it was necessary for me to do it and how it's going to improve my journey to recovery.
I can remember witnessing some clinicians where, you know, in sort of my past roles, and they've actually apologised to people, they've apologised to families or to young person when they're using the outcome measures. And I'm not really quite sure what they're apologising over. It feels like they're apologising because it's irrelevant. And that also reinforces the fact that they don't believe that it's useful.
Giving sort of like an outcome measure for the sake of doing one isn't going to be useful. but actually maybe just explaining how an outcome measure will fit into someone's therapy or their treatment. So for example, it could be used to capture or monitor progress. It could just be used to see what's going well, what's not going well, and it could be used to help find out more about the person. Because sometimes, like, I know when maybe filling out like a questionnaire outcome measure, I sort of then look back at it and it feels like it makes sense. So it provides some sort of like clarity on what's going on. So it can be used for different reasons. And I think it's just exploring what is the best way to use them, so you're not just using them for the sake of using them.
I think it's essential that young people are involved in looking at the measures, but also having a little bit of a summary of what the measures are for, why we use these measures. I think that would be a really good thing. And then at the end of that, seeing how that form highlighted where the therapy goes next. Because often it can be quite difficult to articulate that in words sometimes.
Outcome measures can be a really useful tool if they're utilised at the right time and worked into, your treatment, your session.
So explain, go through the results and make it feel like part of the sessions. Otherwise, people might feel paranoid, vulnerable, or like you're not listening. It is also essential to consider whether the service user requires support when answering these questions. Not every young person feels comfortable or safe when filling out the questionnaires.
I think it's really important to do the questionnaire with the young person, because I find, particularly as someone who's autistic, I often find it hard to understand what the questions really mean. For example, if I was that young person doing the questionnaire, I would find it quite stressful, but also might not answer in the way I probably should, because some of the questions I wouldn't understand how they're supposed to be understood.
These people are having probably emotional regulation problems or something like that if they're with you. So it's really important to actually draw on those emotions and make sure they're feeling supported in every step of the therapy, including doing measures. Just saying, do you understand the questions? Do you need anything rephrased? Do you feel comfortable right now? Do you feel safe right now in yourself? Do you feel like you can answer these effectively? Making sure they're fully explained, fully discussed. If there's anything that's going to happen because of the measures, taking some real time to talk through it and explore the feelings around it. Like, for example, I found that outcome measure sheet really difficult because it was making me really face what I'm feeling. Okay, would you like to talk about that? How would you like to feel next time you do it? How would you like to be supported next time you do it?
So the young person might need you to make sure that they feel supported with those questions. And some young people do say that they experience outcome measures as a tick box exercise. What can practitioners do to avoid that?
It is at its core a scientific tick box, and that's not using it in a negative way. It is physically ticking a box or something. But it doesn't mean you can't expand on that, and it has to be quite emotive because you're in an emotional practice.
So how I usually talk about it is saying to the young person, this, I'd really like to do this with you. It's answering lots of different questions, but at the end of it, it really gives us an idea and can point us in the right direction. It's not the only thing that we're going to use, because we're going to look at things about your history and things that are happening now that gives us a really good picture.
And it adds a shared understanding with the young person that I'm not just going to talk about your symptoms. I'm actually going to talk about when there's even the slightest improvement. I'm actually going to talk about what difference that's made to your life.
We have to recognise that sometimes it will feel like a tick box exercise, but if practitioners explain why this information is useful, explore around the questionnaire and use other information as well, then it can help young people feel that it is just one part of putting together a picture of who they are and how they're doing. It is really all about how you do it as a practitioner and how you acknowledge that the outcome measure is a part of the relationship.
Ease it into a conversation, then that would be way more comfortable than just being handed a form.
It's less about the outcome measures themselves and more about how you sell it positively, because if it comes naturally through a conversation in in a safe space that you've established beforehand with a person that feels comfortable sharing this stuff with you, it will not even be a hard conversation to have. It will just come naturally through the conversation that you're having.
I've heard lots of times practitioners saying that it's another job to do, that you haven't got time to do an outcome measure. You've got to make the time. It's got to be part of the session. It's got to be done collaboratively. I think we need to change the way that we work to make sure that that's what we're doing, because that's what young people are saying, is actually valuable.
So the questionnaire is only as useful as the way in which it is used. For it to be worthwhile, you need to know why you're completing it and be completing it as part of a trusting relationship. And finally, don't assume what the person will think and feel about outcome measures. Give us information, as much choice as you can, and above all, listen.
Young people don't like them. I say, how do you know? Have you asked them? And the usual response is no. I think that as adults we make assumptions about what young people might like and might not like.
All people in general should have a choice on how they're used. So it's never a conversation when, for me it wasn't, at least with outcome measures. It was just given to me. I had to complete it. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't opt out, couldn't choose to skip questions. And they did point out when I skipped any question, they were like, we need you to answer that. A lot of people that facilitate therapy or do counseling or clinicians tend to assume a lot of things that young people think about, like what we like, what we don't like, what is going through our heads. And I think most of the times it's supposed to be a conversation. If you think something, just ask and we can tell you, especially in terms of routine outcome measures.
Practitioners told us that outcome measures help them to understand what is going on with young people's mental health and their support. The young people we spoke to added layers to our understanding. Ultimately, it all depends on how you do it. Explain why you were asking me to fill it in. Go through the results with me and make the questionnaire feel like a part of our sessions together. Think about what it will be like for me to fill it in and be there to support or help me if that is what I need. Explore my questionnaire responses with me and be clear that a questionnaire score can only be a part of building the bigger picture of who I am and how I'm feeling. Your asking me to fill in the questionnaire is impacted by our relationship. If I trust you and understand where you are coming from, then it will be more meaningful. Give me choice where you can, and don't make assumptions about how I will feel about the questionnaires.
We will now continue to explore the main benefits of using measures, with more emphasis and consideration of the benefits to children and young people themselves. The use of measures ensures that the individual voice of a child or young person is heard and captured as part of their treatment or support. This means that support provided is more likely to be centred on the child or young person and their needs. The use of measures in the work with children and young people promotes shared decision making and collaborative working, where children and young people are listened to and their views are considered in decisions that affect their support. As a result of all of this, the treatment provided to a child or young person is more likely to be focused upon their specific needs and preferences. Research tells us that this is more likely to build their motivation for treatment and their engagement with treatment and their treatment provider or mental health professional. The effective use of measures benefits mental health professionals and their practice in various ways as shown here. They maintain a focus on the outcomes that are important to the child or young person. They build upon, not replace, professional judgment to develop a more comprehensive understanding or picture of what is going on for a child or young person. Linked to this, and also backed by research, we know that using measures means that important and relevant information is less likely to be missed or neglected. We know that the therapeutic relationship, or the relationship between a child or young person and the mental health professional, is crucial to the successful completion of treatment, meaning better outcomes and impact of support. Measures can be used both to develop this relationship and to monitor it over time. We spoke with some mental health professionals from across Avon and Wiltshire partnership to capture their views on the use of measures in their practice. This is what Alistair told us.
Outcome measures have many benefits, I think, both to the practitioner and the young person. I'd say the use of outcome measures helps to identify where the greatest area of need is for that young person, and in particular, making sure they get the right type of support. They're also really useful in terms of measuring how effective our interventions are, and if needed, help us to kind of improve the support in a way that's tailored to the young person's needs. It's also really helpful at detecting any kind of like worsening of symptoms, and any other information that otherwise I might have missed, and just kind of aiding our kind of formulation and work with the young person and the family. I think from the perspective of the young person, I think ROMs help to get their voice across in a session. In my experience, the use of routine measures such as like the outcome rating, outcome rating scale and the session rating scale have helped young people to express things that otherwise I think they would have found really hard to say, and actually kind of leads on to actually really useful conversations to kind of like inform the session and what we need to focus on just in that session rather than the bigger work as well.
Before we explore measures in more detail and your responsibilities for using them, it is important to consider some key principles to using outcome feedback tools which apply to all measures in all contexts. Firstly, measures are not an obligatory administrative task that must be ticked off to satisfy managerial demands. This way of using them is unlikely to incur the wide range of benefits illustrated previously. Instead, measures should be used in the spirit of reflection, investigation, and collaboration, and I will show you how to get more information on this approach shortly. Another principle of using measures is that they should benefit children and young people and the direct work with them. We have seen that the data from measures has a number of uses for teams and services, but this is secondary to the value they have for support and treatment. We advise that measures should be implemented with a clear plan for why and how they're going to be used, and this should be explainable to children and young people and their families. Lastly, we're not suggesting that measures provide all of the information that is needed to provide the best type of help for a child or young person. The findings from measures should be used alongside professional judgment and any other pieces of relevant information to gain the best understanding of what is happening for the child or young person. To learn more about an effective approach to using measures in practice, it is highly recommended that you take a look at a short video made by the Child Outcomes Research Consortium. This video details the 6 steps to using any measure in order to gain maximum benefit from it. A link to this video can be found on the shared staff workspace that will be shared in the last section of this module. The 6 steps covered in this video are shown here. I won't speak through all of these in this module, but suffice to say that each requires some attention and consideration. Let's go back to hearing from practitioners at AWP. This time Lizzie shares her thoughts on using measures for children and young people.
I think from my experience as well is young people quite like them. So when we're using them meaningfully, giving like a clear rationale as to why we're completing them every week, asking the same questions again and again, and maybe showing them graphs and using them as part of our sessions, I haven't really noticed any resistance to kind of completing those ROMs. So I think actually young people quite like doing them and having a way to communicate to us as practitioners and say how maybe they're really feeling. As sometimes it might not be as easy to do that kind of verbally or yeah.
Now let's explore the AWP approach to routine outcome measuring and monitoring across all children and young people's mental health services. The strategy is based upon collecting and using 3 types of measure. Firstly, it is expected that staff use the goal-based outcome measure, or GBO, to set and track the child or young person's treatment goal. Goals have enormous potential and can be used in all contexts and settings. Let's explore this a little more in a moment. Secondly, staff use a suitable and relevant measure of symptoms or functioning. We will look at these in more detail soon too. Thirdly, it is important that staff both capture feedback from children and young people and use this feedback to make improvements to their treatment and support. On the subject of using goals, let's start by hearing the perspective of a mental health professional at AWP and more from Alistair.
I think in my experience, like the use of sort of goal measures has been really important to my practice. I I think in particular, they've helped me to kind of make sure that whatever we're doing is really collaborative. So, you know, I know in my past experience, maybe when there haven't been goals, that the work can become quite vague, or kind of maybe more things that I want to work on. So I think having kind of goal measures keep the work really focused, and again, helps the work to be really useful to what it is the young person wants and what they're coming to CAMS for, I guess.
So that was Alistair talking about his experiences of using goals in his practice. To understand more about how exactly to use goals in your practice to get the most out of them, please refer to the final section of this module. There I will show you how to easily access videos and other guidance on using goals with children and young people all in one single place. Let's now consider when you are expected to use measures with children and young people. Measures should be used in the very first sessions, including assessment. When assessment is carried out by a different professional to the person who is providing treatment, measures can be introduced and completed in assessment, but the findings, the results from them, should be discussed with the child or young person during treatment. Whichever measures are used, they should be revisited and reviewed. This should happen frequently and throughout treatment. Indeed, goals and feedback measures are designed to be used regularly, but at a minimum they should be completed again in sessions 6 to 8 and at case closure, the last session, or whichever is sooner. Within the first 3 sessions, a symptom measure or measure of functioning should be completed alongside a goal measure. It is likely for a symptom tracking or functioning measure to be completed at assessment, and then for the goal measure to be discussed and used as part of treatment by the mental health provider. To allow for this, we have set the expectation of the first 3 sessions. It is good practice to collect and to respond to feedback from the child or young person about the sessions. We recommend this is done routinely throughout treatment using the session rating scale or the session feedback questionnaire, starting from the first sessions. This process of asking for feedback and using it to enhance treatment can be very powerful, and we will signpost more information and resources on how to incorporate this into practice in the last section of this module. In the first section of this module, I highlighted the importance of using measures meaningfully with children and young people. A significant aspect of this is introducing and explaining them to each child or young person. On their own, measures can appear threatening, judgmental, or risky to those completing them, which is why best practice is that they are discussed with service users when they see them for the first time, whenever this is possible. We recognise that it is efficient to send measures via a link or in the post, and this can be done once a child or young person is familiar with measures. Measures completed within the first 3 sessions of treatment should be reviewed and redone throughout treatment. The minimum expectation is that this is done within sessions 6 to 8 or at case closure or discharge if that is sooner. It is likely that goals and feedback measures are used more regularly to enhance treatment. At the end of treatment or discharge, please ensure that the same measures are recompleted. Indeed, the information from these measures can be used to help explain progress to the child or young person, or to justify signposting to further help. At case closure, or the last session with a child or young person, please ask them and their parents or carers to complete the Experience of Service Questionnaire or ESQ. Please explain why this information is so helpful for us to make things better for all children and young people who come to AWP CAMS. On this slide, you can see a list of measures for you to consider. There are 3 good options for when a measure of anxiety or depression is most appropriate: the RCADS, GAD-7 and PHQ-9. In terms of other measures of symptoms and functioning, there are a suite of tools that do different jobs. These are often relevant to different age groups and have different numbers of questions. Please familiarise yourself with these tools so that you can select the one that suits the needs of the child or young person and their treatment the best. You will be able to locate each of these measures along with any guidance about their use all in one place, which I'll show you in a moment. We recognise too that some specific pathways, such as those listed here on the right hand side, have specific measures designed for that client group, such as the Eating Disorder Examination Questionnaire or the Sheffield Learning Disabilities Outcome Measure. Of course, these should be explored as the chosen measure of symptoms or functioning for any associated work and used alongside goals and feedback measures as already described. Let's hear again from Lizzie.
I guess my top tips when it comes to measures are just have a bit of a system. So make it routine, like have it as a routine as part of your sessions each week. Try and like score them up as soon as possible, or use IAPTIS. IAPTIS is great for kind of scoring up your ROMs for you and sharing those in sessions. So that could either just be sharing on a screen or just kind of print screening that graph and printing it out and giving that to a young person so that you can have that kind of meaningful discussion about their ROMs rather than just doing it and then not really looking at them.
So we've now come to the very last section of this training module, and as promised, I want to ensure that you can easily access all of the information, guidance and support to successfully incorporate routine outcome measurement into your day-to-day practice. Everything you should need can be found on our space in the CAM section in a single space or folder named Routine Outcome Measures. In this you can find 3 sections. The first contains all of the measures for you to select from and use. These are all the measures that we saw listed a moment ago in this training module. You can download and use these electronically or print off as needed. The second is a place to go if you want to explore more guidance and information on using certain measures, using measures in general, and applying different approaches in your work. This is where you will find a link to the 6 steps to the effective use of measures video, for example. It is also where you can find links to useful guidance on how to implement goals into practice and how to successfully ask for and respond to client feedback. This folder is likely to be the first place that staff check for any help they need using outcome and feedback measures. The final section holds information on where to go if you have any further questions or want to explore other types of support. This includes a link to your team outcomes measure champion where identified. It was a great person to approach for all things related to routine outcome monitoring. There are a number of other ways to get advice and support internally and externally, which you'll find too in this section. This module has covered essentials of routine outcome monitoring and measuring, but of course there is much more to explore and to learn. Please do access the support provided on our space and speak with the appropriate persons within your team and at AWP as often as is helpful. And remember, there is no such thing as a silly question. For those members of staff who are new to outcome measurement and those that may be a little uncertain or unconvinced, my final word of advice is give it a go. Many thanks for listening to this training module and for all your efforts and hard work. I would like to finish by saying a huge thank you to everyone who has contributed the time and effort to the making of this guide. First and foremost, thanks to Ali and Lizzie for sharing their experiences and allowing us to use them for this guide. Thank you too to the core team who put this together in collaboration with the ROMs Champions Group and Barbara, Rosina and Libby at AWP.